Okay, hopefully people can start settling down. It's a lot of chat. We've obviously had a very exciting half day, but we're going to be getting started very soon. So if I can ask people to start quieting down so we can begin. Really great to see so many people as well. Just waiting for the last few people to take their seats and we can get going. Okay. Well, first of all, a massive, massive, massive welcome to everyone joining us for Marxism Festival 2022, organised by us, the Socialist Worker Party. A massive, massive welcome. A big welcome to everyone who's watching online and joining this on Zoom. It's fantastic we're having this festival as a hybrid as well. And really, to get going, I mean, you know, what an exciting time it is to be having this sort of festival as well. You know, we live in a world where now more than ever, radical ideas and radical theory to change the world, you know, they matter more than ever before. So Marxism really couldn't come at a better time, to be honest. And I hope people are excited for the 2 days ahead of us. Lots of us have already enjoyed already a half day of sessions and so on. And there's a whole lot more workshops, meetings, and so on over the weekend. To introduce myself, my name is Nadia. I'm a member of the Socialist Worker Party. And just to remind again, the Socialist Worker Party have organised this festival this weekend. And I'll be chairing today's rally. Without further ado, I mean, we have a fantastic lineup of speakers, and I'll introduce them one by one. But first, I'd like to introduce Bella Fashola. Bella Fashola is an RMT member and one of the organisers of the Churchill Cleaners Strike, and somebody who's a member of the SWP in Hastings, really. And just to introduce the Churchill campaign, they're on strike for £15 an hour, sick pay, and the same treatment as those directly employed by the train lines and so on. And actually, I have a petition to show later after Bella's spoken, but I want people to give a massive, massive welcome to Bella Fashola from the RMT.
Hello, everyone. I haven't always been the best speaker, so bear with me. I'm getting better gradually. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak the story of the Churchill Cleaners. For you that don't already know, we're outsourced to Churchill's. We clean the trains for Southern, Southeastern, Eurostar, and Network Rail High Speed. We, the train cleaners, are on the bare minimum as many other cleaners in many other industries with outsourced firms. We are on minimum wage. We have no company sick pay, which forces us into work when we're ill. We also have no travel facilities. So cleaners are earning around £1,200 a month. A large chunk of that money is going to travel to the train they're going to clean or to the station they're going to clean when they get there, roughly around £400. Everyone says that cleaning is an unskilled job. Cleaning is not an unskilled job. Everybody needs it in every single industry. It is the bedrock. Thank you. On top of being on the bare minimum, our lovely company Churchill continue to underpay our wages. By doing this from site to site, each month someone's underpaid, which means workers are then forced to go to payday loans and they end up in a constant cycle of debt, which means they're trapped working for the same company and can't progress. We have no access to the internal roles on the railway, which makes it even harder. We're trapped with Churchill's in a debt cycle, struggling to survive. Something I found out recently when we started our campaign back in January this year One of our demands is for a premature baby policy. I didn't even know that existed. It's more of a moral obligation rather than something that you should have to demand in pay talks. As it stands, thank you. As it stands at the moment, an expectant mother, if she has her baby early, she will not be paid until it reaches the day that she gave to go off on her maternity leave. It's absolutely disgusting. If she wants to change that date, she's got to give 6 weeks' notice. This is a company whose ethos is doing the right thing. Who are they doing the right thing by? Themselves, because they're definitely not doing it by their staff. We're asking for £15 an hour, company sick pay, travel equivalent to the directly employed staff, some respect from our own company. But I've seen some tweets. Why should cleaners get £15 an hour? Well, why the hell not? Why? I am very proud to be a cleaner, and I tell this to every fellow cleaner I meet, don't matter what industry you're in, be proud in your own role. We're not unskilled workers. Most cleaners on the railway, people don't know this, we have to be med screened the same way as the drivers, the guards, the platform staff, and the signalman, or the signal person, sorry. We also have to do training. Some people have to do PTS training, which is every 2 years, personal track safety, or in my part of the company, the very watered down version, which is the CIDIs, safety in depots, yard and sidings. We have to do exactly the same as those directly employed, but we don't get the benefits. On site visits all around the GTR network, I've seen some disgusting facilities that these cleaners are having their breaks in, downtime, and eating their food in. I'm talking breeze blocks and a concrete floor. One mess room that I went to had an inspector chamber. They're eating their food and they've got an inspector chamber with rats running around in their mess room facilities. It's absolutely disgusting. It's inhumane. Our job as train cleaners, as station cleaners, is to keep the trains and stations sanitised for all the other key workers travelling around on the railway. We do this with pride. We will help anyone who we see in need, whether that's directions or helping you to the lift with your baggage, but we don't get any thanks. What we got in the pandemic was a text from our employer Churchill's asking us to clap for the key workers. Some of us got a badge. I threw mine in the bin. We are the super exploited workers. We have been for a very long time. And we are all now standing up and standing together to fight for what is ours. We're not being greedy, we're not asking for the world, we're asking for what is needed. Why should we have to come to work every single day and still struggle to survive? Why should my fellow colleagues have to work full time to sleep at a bus shelter for night time? It's disgusting. I've learnt a lot since joining the union, the RMT, around 4 years ago. A lot that they offer in school, because ignorance is bliss in their minds. I've learnt that together we can achieve anything, that even on my contract and the other Churchill contracts, cleaners, 40 different nationalities together, standing side by side on a picket line, shouting for their rights, demanding for a better living. As the saying goes, the workers united will never be defeated. That saying really hits home, so let's all say it together. The workers united will never be defeated. Solidarity.
United will never be defeated. The workers united will never be defeated. A big thanks to Bella for kicking off in quite a fantastic way our opening rally. And if people want to support Bella and the Churchill Cleaners, there's going to be these leaflets around the festival throughout the whole weekend. It's got more information as to what you can do to support, but as well there's a QR code that takes you to a petition. Show your support to the Churchill Cleaners, sign the petition, share the petition, and let's get behind them. But a massive thank you to Bella. Our next speaker, I'm very pleased to announce, is Jane Gwynn. Jane Gwynn is an underground worker, an RMT member, and the chair of the Jubilee South branch. And actually, it's worth saying that the underground workers were on strike last week with the Network Rail, with the workers on strike against Network Rail in what was a really fantastic and inspiring show of Workers Fight Back. So a massive, massive welcome to Jane Gwynn.
Hello. At the TUC demo 2 weeks ago, it really was, of course, a wonderful feeling to go round the corner to cheers a victory to the RMT. That was a great boost to us, and we replayed the video of it and sent it around to people who weren't there many times. I think that was important because when people were cheering us to victory, they were cheering themselves to victory as well. There was a great trade union representation on that demo, much better than for many years previously. And I think that's because there were so many people there who were in dispute, had been in dispute with some victories, or were about to go into dispute. So people were cheering themselves on because people understood that victory to the RMT was also victory to everyone else. I work at London Underground, and we've been in strike now for several months. We've had action going on, and this is over attacks on our pension, our working conditions and job cuts. At the same time, RMT workers from Network Rail are in dispute over the same issues, and also in their case, calling for a long overdue pay rise. When Tory MPs set about attacking us in Parliament, threatening us with legislation which they said would be brought in on the back of our threat to strike, to deaden down those strikes for the future and try to make it impossible to take this kind of effective action, they had three arguments. The first was that the RMT leadership was in the pay of Putin in an attempt to undermine Ukraine. Ludicrous as that might sound, that was said in Parliament. Secondly, they argued for an equality of poverty. MP after MP stood up and said that the average wage of the members of the RMT, of station staff, of drivers, of signal workers was higher than the average wage in their constituency. And really, is that something to be celebrated? Is that something to be ashamed of, that your constituency has so many people whose wages will not meet the cost of living? The final argument was that the Tory MPs argued that public support was with them and not us, and that simply is not true. At a meeting about the Labour Party this morning, there was a discussion where Keir Starmer's instruction to the front bench that he did not wish to see any of them on our picket lines. Now, I know this was an instruction to the front bench alone, but you can take from it that that was Keir Starmer's message to its whole party about what their position should be regarding striking workers. In reality, there were more visits from RMT councillors and Labour MPs on the picket lines this time than last time. The last time, 6 years ago, Corbyn was in charge of the Labour Party, and it's not that no one came, but this time far more people came. So you'd have to think, well, why is that, when they've been instructed really that this isn't the position they should take? And you have to draw the conclusion that perhaps those people in councils, those people on the ground, are more in touch with what public opinion really is than with the leader of that party. Of course, RMT members are members of the public themselves. The whole thing, trying to pit one set of workers against another is a nonsense. And when you want to isolate somebody, you try and paint them as being other, as being different, as being something not like you. And this was certainly tried by the Tory party, where people turned around and said to them quite rightly, weren't you celebrating these people a few months ago when you said that they were the heroes, along with all the workers that had to physically leave their house during the pandemic because those were the jobs they did, were celebrated as heroes of keeping the place moving, of allowing NHS and other essential service to function. And Grant Shapps replied, yes, of course those people are heroes, but they are being misled by extremely left-wing Marxists. Now, this clearly is nonsense. All the Marxists could do, like any of us in the workplace, is take the same facts and make arguments about why industrial action is the answer. But we can't make anybody do anything. People are there because they are persuaded that this is what they need to do. Like all workers, pensioners, children and workers, we are finding our living conditions and our futures under attack. We are being asked to pay for a crisis which is not of our making by those who have profited from that crisis. Public support is absolutely great. The same way as the media presence of our General Secretary, Mick Lynch, in the last week has been a fantastic boost to us all. To see somebody very calmly tackling nonsensical questions from the media. But in the end, neither public support nor media presence will win these struggles. The only thing we'll win is what we've already seen, is this fight back by workers, by the only real power that we have, which is our industrial power. Because of our ability to carry out such a widespread strike, we may be seen as at the forefront of a wave of strikes, but we are certainly not alone. This is a fight for the dignity of all workers in winning and defending decent wages, pensions and working conditions. Solidarity with those who are part of this fight. Victory to the RMT and victory to us all.
A big thanks to Jane and huge solidarity to her and the underground workers who are balloting for strike action and the RMT members who are really leading the way in terms of a fight back. Before I announce the next speaker, what I'd like to do is just highlight, perhaps people know about this already, but yesterday in Sudan, a massacre had taken place. The military shooting openly at protesters, marking the anniversary of the downfall of the dictator Omar al-Bashir 2 years ago. And this is not the first of this sort of repression towards people resisting and fighting in Sudan to continue their revolution and protect the democracy and so on that they have been fighting for. We ask everyone to show their solidarity with the people in Sudan against these massacres and so on. and what hopefully it's already been going around, but there's this petition that should be going around, but also will be at the back of the hall and around the festival. It's a petition put together by Men of Solidarity. It would be fantastic if people signed this petition and lend their support and so on. And of course, talk to the people handing the petitions as to what more they can do to support the campaign and give solidarity to those fighting for revolution in Sudan. So that will be much appreciated, and thank you for people to do in doing that. To announce our next speaker, I'm pleased to bring in Hayden Jones, Hayden is part of the Coventry bin strike, now one of the longest running disputes in Unite the Union's history. And Hayden and his fellow strikers are fighting for better pay. So let's give a massive welcome to Hayden.
Hello, everybody. I bring you greetings and solidarity from the picket line in Coventry. Our struggle, in theory, started in January this year, but in reality, it started in 2018 when we were promised a pay rise. But with the pandemic that was approaching, we decided that it wasn't the right time and decided to put all hands to the pump to make sure that we could help our city and get through that pandemic. But then once we could see that there was some kind of light at the end, we then approached our employer. And we'd been promised this pay rise since, like I say, 2016 in reality. But once we got there, time delaying tactic that any employer could throw at you. And I want to remind you all that this is Coventry City Council that is Labour run. So as I get into this story, you'll understand the difficulty that we've had with this party. We started our strike in January and we had all hopes that it'd be a short one, that we thought that we might not actually have to get to the end of the full 12 weeks of that strike. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case, because what we seen was a real determined attack of blatant lies that was being thrown at us. And I mean from everything. They were calling us greedy. They were saying that we were on £52,000 a year. And when we tried to explain to everybody the difficulty of earning £52,000 as a grade 5 HGV driver in Coventry, when your wages start at £11.39 and will finish at £14.39 after a 12-year period. That's how long it will take you to get to the £14.39. We then broke that down and actually made it quite clear that a driver at the top of the grade would have to work 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year, take no holiday and work every bit of overtime and a full gritting season. And yet the council still decided to pursue this avenue of slating us. Now, what I will say is, when we got to our second ballot, as we come to that ballot, we all looked at each other and we thought, there's no way in this world that we're going to be knocked around like that and be spoken to and be called lawyers. So we decided that we're in and we're staying in. So we balloted, and again, we had another fantastic result. We came back at almost 100%. And then it really started getting dirty. Remember, this is a Labour Party. We then started getting a lot more accusations that was being thrown against us, that we were lying, that our wage slips weren't correct. And then thankfully, a journalist that you might know called Hayden Jones came down to our picket line. And he done a interview with us. But that was a two-part interview, because his next interview was with George Duggins, the council leader, and Patricia Hetherington, who is the councillor in charge at Coventry City Council of the Waste Department. Well, I'm not sure if any of you have seen that, but it was quite funny, and it actually made us quite happy on our picket line. And I'm quite sure that everyone could see that it was a lie around the £52,000. So we finally got that one cleared up. And it took some time. It really, really did. But then we move on. Again, this time now, they started to attack the trade union. And by that, I mean our deputy convener, Pete Randall, who they say, and these claims are absolutely bogus and outrageous, saying that he was being violent on the picket line, that he was calling people names, singing songs like "Who Ate All the Pies," calling the director the C word. And then bearing in mind, we're being very clever on our picket line now because we know how dirty they're fighting. So every time there is an opportunity to have a talk with them on our picket line, or when they come down on our picket line to have a go at us, we video it. Now, what I will say is, through that other ballot, Coventry Council then decided that they're now going to employ this firm, this private firm, family-run firm called Tom White. But it's not a privately run firm. It's a firm that was bought by Coventry City Council for £15 million. And what they've done to get around the agency aspect of it is they've described it as a private company. And this company itself is hiring these drivers. And it's not the carriers that's on strike. And everyone keeps on making this mistake. It's the waste section that's on strike. It's not. It's actually the HGV drivers at Coventry City Council. But the waste drivers are the largest amount of drivers there. What Coventry City Council then did do, they've decided that they're going to start paying these drivers £18 right up to £27 an hour. Now, bearing in mind, okay, that we're on £11 up to £14, we would have been happy with the £18. There's no need for us to go on strike. We actually even applied for some of them jobs. Not to take them, but just to see if it was real. And believe me, we were being harassed. So what I will say is, we are determined and will go on. We are the longest strike. And guess what? We'll stay out another 6 months. There ain't no problem with that. And what I will say is, I believe Coventry started something in the very beginning, because I've been to many picket lines now, and it was great to actually go to the picket line at the RMT on their strike, because they were one of the first ones to come to our picket line and showed that solidarity. And I'm hoping now that we can have not just a summer of discontent, but a whole year of discontent, so that we can bring these Tories down. But please be aware, who do we replace them with? Look what they've done to us in Coventry. Is Labour the answer? That's what we have to ask ourselves. What are we going to replace the Conservatives with? Because what they've done to us in Coventry, I promise you, you would have the same feeling in your heart as what, and it is hatred and contempt. And I can never, ever vote for Labour again. Solidarity to all.
A big thanks to Hayden for that. And it's been fantastic having this opening rally kicked off by 3 striking workers. So massive thank you to all 3 of you. I'm going to bring in now Tandrima Mazumdar. She's a refugee activist, an activist in women's rights too, including supporting women who survive violence and trafficking, and runs a women's migrant empowerment group in Salford, where she's based. So if people can give a massive, massive welcome to Tandrima.
I'm a little nervous. Firstly, so proud to be part of this panel, really, so proud. Secondly, what an amazing crowd. Thank you so much. So proud to be here. Do you know what? For me, I could just say 2 sentences. I don't like the Tories, I don't like what they're doing to me, and I could just go home. But no, I'm going to take all of the 8 minutes that you're going to give me, Nadia, and I'm going to tell you exactly what they're doing to us. I'm going to tell you that I believe in justice, and I don't believe in lip service. I want to see a change in the world, and I'm willing to do my part in that process. I would like to see some actions planned here. I'd like to see some responsibilities given and taken for this hostile environment of inequality that the stories have brought upon us It needs to be challenged and it needs to be overturned. Thank you. It's very alarming to see the rise of far-right governments and politics around the world. What these regimes are doing is barbaric and inhuman, stripping rights of workers while exploiting the masses to feed their greed. The encroachment of rights always starts with women's rights and migrants' rights being questioned and stripped away. It makes me happy to see so many of you here because you believe in standing up for your rights and the rights of those who aren't able to stand up against this unethical government who is creating a divide in the society. This divide is created by the ruling class that fosters racism, hate crime, and forces us to see differences between us instead of celebrating what binds us together. This government has failed every possible test of humanity, and it has been doing so successfully because it's always got away with its outrageous policies unchallenged, because of the ineffective opposition, who is actually more interested in upholding the system than fighting for our rights. Sadly, this opposition has lacked tact and conviction to remove this corrupt government, even though there has not been any shortage of opportunities. I have been screaming at the television and the radio lots of times anyway. I want to see a change in stance, more action against this oppressive government who feel they're entitled to accrue more wealth for their cronies. I want to see more demonstrations, more strikes, and a demand for answers, not just talk and more talk, which only fills up their pockets. This government's refugee and asylum policies widely blame the very victims that it's supposed to protect. By treating asylum seekers as criminals, people face a whole new set of barriers of living a normal life, which actually defeats the very purpose of asylum itself. This government has aggressively blamed migrants for shortage of everything, from jobs, housing, healthcare, while they have been denied the right to work and forced to live on less than £40 a week, which I think you can all imagine how hard it is in these times as well. I have been leading a campaign to get free bus travel across Greater Manchester for asylum seekers. This has only been available for Ukrainian refugees who are addressed differently simply because they are white. While it was inspiring to see the British public open their hearts and homes for the Ukrainian refugees, I really hope we do the same for every refugee. This two-tier system lays bare the discrimination of non-white refugees. We see negative rhetoric from the media aiding this government's hate, blaming migrants for this condition, which they are not responsible for. The bias is extremely evident in the recent interviews with Mick Lynch, who they have been trying to ridicule, but who, by the way, is an excellent leader. So what causes refugees? Along with war and internal conflict, there are other factors at play. Climate change. It's going to make the world sicker, hungrier, poorer, and way more dangerous by 2040. More people will be forced out of their homes due to weather disasters, especially flooding, sea level rise, and tropical cyclones. From Burkina Faso to Bangladesh, from Afghanistan to Mozambique, there is a rise in poverty, instability, and it's causing human movement. We are fed the myth of scarcity as the bourgeois continue to thrive. Unless the EU changes its approach to migration, more people will be brutalized and killed. The causes of migration can also be traced back to colonial conquests, when the colonies were used for mass production of commodities. which require cheap labor and raw material. This in turn has enriched European nations, but it's impoverished their colonies. The colonizers not only dismantled the sovereignty of nations, mine as well, they modernized and also depleted their natural resources. This sadly hasn't ended and continues even today under the guise of capitalist ideals of modernization. The creation of borders themselves was specifically designed to keep out the non-white populations, yet the blame and responsibility are shifted on the poorer nations and the global south for any crisis, be it climate change or migration. Many hostile and questionable initiatives have been used by this government over the past decade, aimed at making life harder for the common people. The hostile environment has made it harder to work, rent property, open bank accounts, get driving license, access welfare and public services. There is evidence of malnutrition, cramped and substandard accommodation, and mental illness amongst migrant families unable to access public funds. This hostile environment has not worked for anybody. It hasn't worked for migrants or the Home Office or the wider British public. Big money players hide and shift the blame to the most vulnerable who don't have a voice. While the rich keep getting richer, the working class people are forced into poverty who are standing now in front of food banks. This government has managed to create a divide in the society by fueling conflict, dividing us, distracting us. And the Nationality and Borders Bill, it represents the biggest legal assault on international refugee law ever seen in the UK. It violates at least 10 different laws. The failures of the immigration and asylum system can't be solved by this harsh and cruel bill. It will only create ways to make billionaires of Tony cronies. It's time to question who profits from these policies. We must demand a halt in the implementation of this bill. We must demand a halt that sees refugees as criminals. We must demand safe routes to be made available to everyone seeking sanctuary. The hostile environment that has fostered racism, pushed people into destitution, and wrongly targeted people who are living in the UK legally. We must demand an end to all of this, and we must demand it now. Thank you so much for your patience.
Refugees are welcome here. Say it loud, say it clear. Refugees are welcome here. Refugees are welcome here. A big thanks to Tandrima. I think everyone can agree that was an absolutely powerful contribution to this rally. I'm really pleased to introduce next Jake Bowers, who is a Romani journalist, is part of the Drive to Survive campaign, and has been campaigning against the police bill that's now become law since it's been being pushed through Parliament. So can we give a huge, huge welcome to Jake Bowers?
Thank you. Thank you. I hope you can all hear me. Yeah, it has become law. I was just looking up there and it says kill the bill. We need to update those posters, something like scrap the act or crap on the act or something like that. Because do you know what? Earlier this week on the 28th, the police bill did become law. And I don't know if any of you saw it, but it didn't take very long for the Metropolitan Police to go down to Stop Brexit Man and nick his loudspeaker. I mean, how mean-spirited is that? I hope he's got a load more of them so that he comes back. Because I'll tell you one thing, right? Part 3 of that bill, of that act, and part 4 is a direct assault on all of us. Part 3 is banning any form of obnoxious or loud protest. What kind of country do you have to live in where you have to apply for the right to protest? We rightly criticize Putin and everything that he does. But it's no different. It's absolutely no different. We live in a time now where our democratic rights, our rights to change the world that we live in, are severely restricted because of the Police Act. And that has been caused by the success of movements, by workers' movements, by environmental movements, by Black Lives Matters, by all of those things. It is a kind of a backward form of kind of a pat on the back. The fact that they're clamping down on us so hard shows that we're powerful, and it shows that we must continue to be powerful. Part 4 of that act is the one that affects me particularly, because when that part of the act, it is a direct racist attack on my community. This is a community, the Romani community, that's been in this country for 500 years. When we first got here, they passed the Egyptians Act, which made it a capital offence to be who I am, and we were hung. And later they deported us. The Nazis in the Second World War killed 1.5 million people. And yet none of it works. We are a big community. We are a strong community. There's at least 12 million of us in Europe. And if Priti Patel thinks that she will succeed where Adolf Hitler and Henry VIII failed, she's got another thing coming.
Because I can gladly report that I was at a horse fair the other day where nomadic gypsies and travellers were all gathering for a nice weekend with their families down by the river in Leicestershire, 2 days into this act. And they all said, "What act?" It has had no effect. It is there to chill people and frighten people, but they couldn't give a shit. They're still travelling. They're still stopping. They're still claiming their place in the British landscape despite what Priti Patel wants. They're still trespassing on ground with intent to reside because there's nowhere else for us to be. Because you can't wipe a community out with a piece of law. You can't make them disappear. We are still here and we'll be here for the next 500 years. And do you know what? Whilst it's true what we said when we campaigned against the bill, that we were the canaries in the coal mine of liberty, they brought it in, and let me tell you, the canaries are still singing, right? And we're still flying, and we will continue to be doing so for a very, very long time. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of a history about who we are and where we come from. This is the Romani flag. I managed to borrow it off somebody outside. Don't worry, I will return it. And it is, what it represents is something that you should all know about. The blue is for the sky that we all live on. The earth is for the, or live under. The earth is for the green is for the earth that we all live on. And the red is the chakra that comes from India, which is where all our ancestors come from. And it's red for a reason, because we are in some ways the most socialist of peoples. We are collectives. We own our own means of production. We are powerful people that are the most ungovernable people on earth. So just whilst we can't be wiped out by Priti Patel, we can't be governed by anybody. And we will continue to be that, and we will continue to fly this flag for another 500 years. I've noticed sitting there that you're all really good at chanting, so I want to teach you another chant, and I want to teach you a chant in Romani. In fact, what I want you all to do is I want you all to stand up in a minute when I taught you this, and I want you to all help me put a curse on Priti Patel. I want you to help me curse her in Romani. Now, you know when people learn languages, sometimes the first thing they learn are swear words. Well, I'm not going to disappoint you. Okay, so we got 10,000 people to do this in Parliament Square, and I think it works because when Priti came to put people on a flight to Rwanda, not a single person went on it, and that's as good as it should be. And so the curse is 4 words. The first is easy, it's Priti, that's her name. The next word is chum, that means kiss. The next word is Mandy, and that means my. And the final one is bull, and that means bottom or arse if you're speaking to me. Okay, so what I would like you to do in a minute is I would like you to fight back in the culture wars that have been declared on all of us and declared on the gypsy and traveller people in particular. I don't know how many of you were at the March Against Racism in March. We led that march with 2 horses. What I want you to do is I want you to learn this phrase. And I want you all to meet me in Parliament Square on the grand opening of Parliament in the autumn. When the Queen brings her horses, we will bring ours. We'll bring our horses, we'll bring our caravans, you bring your tents, you bring whatever you want to bring, right? Because we're going to have a party in Parliament Square, and we are going to reclaim Parliament Square for Stop Brexit Man and everybody else who has the right to be there, because our rights are not there to be negotiated or taken away by Priti Patel or Boris Johnson. Okay, so here's the chant, and I want you to do it. And I want you to do it really loudly, right, so that it continues to have an effect. She hasn't rung me up yet asking if she can kiss my ass, but by the time you've done it, I'll take one for the team. Maybe she will. Okay, so what I want you to do is, so the words are pretty chum, Mandy's bull, right? And if you want to stand up, it would make my heart sing as a canary, right? I want you all to shout it with me, okay? We're going to start slowly, and we're going to get louder and louder and louder until she hears it in Essex, wherever she has her trotters up. So, with me, pretty chum, Mandy's bull. 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 Yes, well done. Give yourself a round of applause. I don't know when the state opening of Parliament is. I've just thought of that. But I want to meet you there. When you see that it's happening, and when you see that Queen Liz is dusting off her hat and her golden carriage, prepare your banners, prepare your flags, your tents, your caravans, and meet me there. Thank you very much.
A big thanks to Jake, and I think it seems quite clear that actually we're all happy to join you at Parliament Square in the autumn to send a loud message to the Tories and the royal family. I'm going to bring in our next speaker, Virginia Rodino. She's an abortion rights activist in Maryland, is the executive director of the Coalition of Labour Union Women, and is a member of March 21 in the United States, which is the sister organization of the Socialist Worker Party. So a massive welcome to Virginia from the States.
Thank you. I was expecting just to be a participant in the conference and be able to listen to all of you in the meetings, and then the Supreme Court ruling came down, so here I am. I wanted to start by describing women's and girls' access to abortion in the United States before Donald Trump. It won't be surprising to learn that before Trump was elected, there were rampantly unequal access to safe abortions, and this disproportionately impacted poor people of color. Even before Trump and the present makeup of the Supreme Court, abortion providers were being murdered. Planned Parenthoods and clinics that were providing not just abortions, but education and contraception, women and girls' health care and medical screenings, they were being defunded and forced to close. In the last 10 years, attacks against women's reproductive rights ramped up. In the decade before Trump, hundreds of anti-abortion laws were passed in states across the country. Patients inside the clinics were being murdered, and anti-abortion politicians were being elected in waves. I say this in order for us not to be distracted and to come to the correct solution on how to address this crisis. This isn't an electoral issue. It's not a Republican versus Democratic issue. It's not something that is going to be solved through political candidates. We can look at Democrats such as Bill Clinton and Joe Biden, who have only served to muddy the waters and slow or stop more militant popular resistance. Both Bill and Hillary Clinton's campaign slogan was safe, legal, and rare to describe their abortion policy. After Judge Alito's opinion was leaked last December, and after more than 1 million demonstrators protested across the United States, the U.S. Senate failed to advance a bill that would have preserved broad protections for legal abortion nationwide. Instead of seeking to mobilize masses of people, President Biden and even progressive Democrats suggest that our anger at the Supreme Court be turned into votes for Democrats in the midterm elections this November. The ineffectualness of our political parties and politicians in protecting our basic rights signals yet again how we need to build mass movements to maintain, protect, and win back our rights and freedoms. In fact, it's the neoliberal politics of the Democrats that allows for women to be pushed into poverty in the first place with an inability to access abortion and reproductive care. This corporate party absorbs, neuters, and de-radicalizes movements in an effort to build a larger voting base, not to create the change we need. 60% of people in the United States support abortion rights. Literally, a handful of individuals have overturned the will of the entire country. But as is the case with all of our rights, abortion rights have never simply been granted by politicians. A movement has always had to force them to act to support our reproductive freedoms. And it's no wonder, because this isn't about a fabricated culture war. This is a class issue. Abortion rights are workers' rights. And you won't hear this analysis in any political candidate's campaign materials. The ruling class is torn between needing women for free childcare, raising the next generation of workers, and needing the uninterrupted labor of women in the workforce. Maintaining what is considered the traditional nuclear family today, even though it doesn't fit with reality and how many of us live, it's still vital for the ruling class. The family still plays an essential economic and ideological role to control us. And this includes eliminating abortion rights. Despite the contradictions, the ruling classes don't want women to control their lives and bodies. This is why that LGBTQ rights is a threat to the ruling classes. Judith Orr identified how the increase of attacks on women's rights coincides with the rise of the far right, which was allowed to flourish under Trump. A day ago. And let's not be mistaken that the right wing is certainly not pro-life in any real sense. They don't think that Black lives matter. They don't want to put any restraints on gun corporations and children's access to firearms. And they don't care about working class women who die from injuries on the job or from dangerous abortions. They don't care about migrant children trying to reach a better life but who die trying. Reproductive rights are simply and surely a class issue, and the way to win the fight for these rights is to join together to resist and wrest control of our bodies out of the hands of corporations, out of the hands of right-wing judges, and out of the hands of politicians. There is much opportunity to build international alliances over this issue and alliances with other movements such as the LGBTQI rights movement, since we see how the right will be attacking these communities next. We saw these coalitions among broad forces naturally forming in the streets at recent Pride demonstrations across the world. I'm the executive director of the Coalition of Labor Union Women, and the night before I got on a plane to come here, we called an emergency meeting with about a day's notice to discuss how we need to push resolutions and actions through our unions and fight for languages in our collective bargaining agreements to protect workers. We also talked about general strikes and other workplace actions around this issue. As you know, there's a fever of workers uprising and organizing in the states, and workers are poised to take this issue on. It's up to us to use our political arguments as socialists in getting activists from other movements and union members involved in this struggle. And building that movement is a task before us, because capitalism will always try to find a way to roll back any gains we make that empower us, any threat to their control. We need each other, so please join March 21 in the States, join March 21 in Spain, definitely join the SWP in Britain, the International Socialists in Canada, Worker Solidarity in Korea. Start an IST group in your country if there isn't one yet. A global network is necessary. Join us in this fight and beyond. Be active, organize. We can only beat back these attacks and win our world when we stand together in a global movement of revolutionary solidarity. Thank you, comrades.
A massive, massive thank you to Virginia for that, who's come all the way from the US Marxism Festival. Just to say, Virginia mentioned it at the end. on Saturday, the 9th of July, next Saturday, the abortion rights campaign in the US has called for there to be women's marches all around the world. This is really a day of action. And we'll be joining the protests here in the UK. There'll be one in London outside the US Embassy in Nine Elms. What I want to encourage people to do is the details for the demonstration for abortion rights and in defense of abortion rights in London is going to be on leaflets that look like this, and they're going to be around at the back of the hall. Judith over there is also waving some of the leaflets. If you can't find any, go and speak to the Marxism team, but they'll also be at the back of the hall as people come out. So do grab these and share them around with your friends, and let's support the fight of Virginia and others in America. Now, I'm going to bring in Phil Rowan from the RMT, who's going to make a special announcement. So Phil, if you'd like to come up.
So comrades, we wait years and years for an RMT worker to be on the opening night of Marxism, and then 3 come along at once. I think what the last few weeks have proved is that the official opposition to this government are not in Parliament. The official opposition are in workplaces and on picket lines. And you know, people have rightly said how good Mitt Lynch has been, but I think you go to any picket line in this country and you can find a speaker as good as Mitt Lynch, because all he done, you know, he went on TV and he spoke straight and he gave proper answers, and he said what people want to hear, that we can't afford not to have a pay rise, you know. And he actually turned around to these Oxford and Cambridge graduates that are political commentators and said, you really are talking the most amazing amount of twaddle, as we all would. You know, I realised that the attitude had changed when, for the first time ever, my teenage son went, wow, you're cool, you're an RMT striker. And I thought, something is going on here. But, you know, when we were on them picket lines, and we've been on the picket lines now for a few months on London Underground, you're there from 5 o'clock in the morning, you're there for the full day, and you know, you have certain conversations, and you talk about politics. But with the RMT in particular, I tell you what, how fantastic has the coverage been in Socialist Worker? Both in the paper and on Twitter, and I'm sure if you've got TikTok or whatever, I don't do that, but I'm sure it's been pretty fantastic on that as well. You know, like I said, we have these conversations on the picket line, and we were on strike a few months ago when Ukraine was first starting. And someone actually, I remember the public walked up and said, you're a disgrace going on strike when there's a war on. I said, I'll tell you what, mate, we'll stop the picket line if you want to go and fight. But our own RMT comrades on them picket lines, when we were talking about the war, and we said, absolutely, we're against the war in Ukraine. Absolutely, we're against Russian troops in Ukraine. And absolutely, we're against the expansion of NATO. And we had to have them conversations. We had them conversations, and I felt confident to have them conversations because of what I read in the paper and going to my local SWP meetings in Brixton. And I know for a fact Mickey now is going, we only see him once a month. But no, all that doesn't happen by accident. And who's being proved right now when Sweden and Finland are joining NATO, and when all of a sudden the British government can find £2.3 billion to buy weapons. Last week there was no money for a wage increase. This week there's £2.3 billion to find weapons. Where did they find that money? I'll tell you where they didn't find it. Boris Johnson wasn't going around the pubs in Kilburn selling calendars. No. But like I said, Socialist Worker, and thank you for laughing because Alan Kenny owes me a pint. He said no one would laugh at me joke, but Socialist Worker have done a fantastic job, but you know, this doesn't come through people just giving it up their own time. Things like Marxism and everything we've done on social media cost money. So what's going to happen now, there's going to be some buckets going around. So any loose change you've got, or any not loose change, please put into the bucket. And remember, and I didn't think I'd asked to say this at Marxism, I thought this was just in negotiations. Remember, RPI is 11.2%. Thank you, comrades.
Okay, so we'll give some time for buckets to go round and people to donate. Whatever you can donate, this is a massive, massive help. And just to say, if people don't have any cash or change, then there'll be card machines. Donations can be made using the card machines outside of the hall. But I'll give some time for the buckets to go around. Big thanks to the Marxism team for all of their help. While the buckets are going around, I just wanted to take this time to say that Marxism Festival is about celebrating, debating, and developing ideas to change the world. Books are a weapon in our fight to change the world around us, and so we need them to arm ourselves. Bookmarks is the biggest radical independent bookshop in the UK, and we're lucky to have them here at Marxism Festival. Hopefully, over the course of the weekend and what have you, it will be fantastic if people can show their support towards Bookmarks and keep this radical independent bookshop going by buying the books, arming yourself, exploring the different literature and so on that they've got. Buy a gift for a friend as well. But go and see Bookmarks who are in the Graduate Centre and also outside by the Culture Tent as well. But yeah. Just wanted to highlight Bookmarks being at the festival. All right, a massive thank you to everyone who's made donations. Again, if you'd like to donate by card, there's going to be card readers outside of the hall for you to make your donation that way. But we're nearing the end of our opening rally, so we ought to move on. I'm really, really, really pleased to introduce Amma Anwar. Amma Anwar is a campaigner, a lawyer, and is the lawyer advising the Sheku Bayu family in Scotland. Aamer Anwar was also the lawyer who was involved in the release of the two people at Kenmure Street with those massively inspiring... I think it's worth saying too that a little bit about Aamer Anwar. He'd become a lawyer after the police had bashed his teeth out in 1991 after he'd been on a protest. He won his case against the police, and this is what convinced him to continue the fight legally and so on. So a massive, massive welcome to Amma Anwar.
Thank you, Nadia. It's great to be back some 32 years after I came to my first Marxism as a socialist worker student. But I was also brought back down to earth by Nadia and by Lewis when they told me that they weren't born when I came here last time in 1995. So before I speak to you about Sheku Bayu, I also want to pay tribute, like many have, to the RMT union lynch. And there were some words I saw him on Instagram and social media that was being retweeted again and again. And I want to read them out to you because they struck a chord, I think, with hundreds of thousands of people in this country. And these are the words: all of you have the power. A wheel doesn't turn. A light doesn't go on without us. We create all of the wealth in the society, all of it. It's our labor that delivers the services, makes the goods, distributes them, and delivers them to the people. All we want is our fair share of that. Do not fall for the tricks of the media, trying to play a nurse against a railway worker, a cleaner against a caterer. We can organize ourselves and fight back. We refuse to be poor anymore. And I want to say thank you to Mick Lynch and the RMT union, who have done more for trade union rights and the working class than probably the Labour Party have done in the last 40 years. Now, I'm here today to ask you for support for the family of Sheku Bayo. Some of you may have heard the name of Sheku Bayo. He died in police custody in May 2015 in a town called Kirkcaldy in Scotland. He's been described as Scotland's George Floyd. Now, I never knew Sheku Bayo. He wasn't a rich or a powerful man, but he has a stubborn family. 3 sisters, a mother, a partner, Colette, who have refused to be patronized, refused to be bullied, refused to be lied to or silenced, because they're not asking for anything special. Just the truth, because without truth, there can be no justice. Sheku was 31 years old. He was a trainee gas engineer, a father of 2 young boys, popular and a healthy young man with no previous history of violence, no previous conviction. He'd moved to London at the age of 11 from Sierra Leone after the Civil War started. He then moved to town of Kirkcaldy at 17 to be with his 2 sisters, as they thought it was safer for a young black man to be brought up in Kirkcaldy in Scotland. When on one Sunday on the 3rd of May 2015, at 7:15 in the morning, 9 police officers, 6 police vehicles responded to an alert following calls from members of the public that a black man was walking down a Kirkcaldy street with a knife, acting erratically. Sheku was clearly under the influence of drugs and had taken a bad reaction. 4 police officers reached there first. The police painted an image of a large black man, stereotypical characteristics of extraordinary strength, describing him as the biggest male they had ever seen. Bulging eyes, muscles, wielding a machete, describing him as a zombie who was not reacting to their screaming at him. This, of course, is nothing new. When black men die in police custody, they are dehumanized, they are smeared, they are stereotyped in order to strip them of their right to life. But Sheku was only 5 foot 10 inches. He weighed 80 kilos, 12 stone and 10 pounds. And the first 2 officers to reach him, who dealt with him, one was 20 stones, that's 127 kilos for the younger ones, and 25 stones was the other one, which is 158 kilos, and both those 2 officers were 6 foot 4 inches tall. We now know that Sheku, despite what the press reported, despite the reports in the media in the hours following after Sheku's death, that Sheku had no machete, he had no knife, he was unarmed, he was walking open-handed when the police arrived, and the first officer, 6 foot 4 inches, 20 stones, Officer Alan Payton, immediately jumped out of his van and fired CS spray at Sheku Bayo. Sheku Bayo just tried to walk away from him. The second officer then did the same and fired his spray, and Sheku Bayo still tried to walk away. The third officer took out his baton and decided to try and shoulder charge him, and Sheku Bayo still tried to walk away. It was on the 4th occasion that a police officer fell to the ground after it's alleged that Sheku had punched that officer. Within 32 seconds of the first police officers arriving, Sheku was face down on the ground, losing consciousness within minutes, struggling for his last breaths, and up to 6 police officers restrained him. They applied handcuffs, they put on leg restraints, they put on ankle restraints, and he had been battened to the head at least twice. And when Sheku's lifeless body arrived at the hospital, he was still handcuffed with leg restraints still in place. His sister Caddy described him as a slave, shackled, sent into that ambulance. And reports were released minutes after Sheku lost his consciousness of a policewoman having been stabbed, which several hours later, of course, Police Scotland corrected as being untrue. Sounds particularly familiar after every death in police custody. Remember the rumours after John Charles Domenez. Remember what happened after that young man was, I was going to say the word killed. I better watch myself in case there's some police spies in here and recording it for the Federation. But we saw the video. Many of us saw that video of that man on that bridge when he was attacked with a taser. Clearly troubled, mentally ill, and he was accused of having a screwdriver. He was tasered once, and if you watch that video close, that weapon that he supposedly had dropped to the floor, and he was tasered again. He ran from the police officers as they screamed at him. They did nothing to de-escalate the situation, and that young man, desperate, then jumped over the bridge and died. And it was then days later, after the spinning of the misinformation, after attacking those from Inquest who were supporting the family, who have supported the Sheku Bayo family, that it came out that actually it wasn't a screwdriver. It was a lighter. It wasn't a screwdriver. And in the case of Sheku Bayo, 7 years later, the family are finally able to say after a public inquiry, Sheku had no knife. He had no machete. No policewoman was ever stabbed. And within an hour of Sheku's death, Colette, Sheku's partner, was taken to the police station. And she was told that Sheku was found in a public street by a member of the public who called an ambulance and that the police were looking for 2 men. 9 of the officers returned to that police station. They were placed together in the same room for some 8 hours. And I know, being a criminal defense lawyer for some 22 years, I have never known any accused, multiple accused, after the death of an individual to be put in the same room together for some 8 days. But it got worse than that, because those police officers then decided that they would refuse to give statements for 32 days to the independent investigators of the PERC, and the family began their campaign for justice. 4 years after Sheku's death in 2018, the family were betrayed by our justice system that told the family that no officers would face charges. Not a single charge. Sheku's body was covered with over 24 separate injuries, bruises, cuts, lacerations, and a broken rib. There was no charges, not a charge of murder, not culpable homicide, not serious assault, not assault, no attempt to pervert the course of justice, or no health and safety prosecution against Police Scotland. But Sheku's family asked, did they really think that Sheku's life was so cheap that his family would walk away? And the family campaigned for a public inquiry to get the truth. And it finally began 7 years later and 8 weeks ago on the 10th of May in Edinburgh, and is likely to last up to 2 years. And whether it be in the United States or in Scotland or in England or in Wales, why is it that a black man is always responsible for his own death in police custody? Sheku's sister said, Sheku is Scotland's George Floyd, but she said, the only difference is that in America, 4 days of protests led to several police officers facing trial, whereas in Scotland, 4 years of trusting the system gave them betrayal and lies and no justice. One of the justifications advanced by the police officers at the public inquiry was that they believed in Kirkcaldy, up in Scotland, a small town, that they may have been under a terrorist attack, that they had visions of Lee Rigby and being covered with blood. But of course, that had nothing to do, when they were asked a question by the lawyers, had nothing to do with racism. It had nothing to do with racial profiling. And I say this when I talk about racial profiling, when I talk about black lives. 2 years ago, millions across this planet marched for George Floyd. Everyone in this country, from pop stars to footballers, to government ministers, to police officers, took the knee. People put up the hashtag Black Lives Matter. But 2 years later, where is Black Lives Matter? Where is it to be seen? Because black people are still dying in police custody. But that spirit, as far as I'm concerned, is still there. That anger still exists. It was there 1 year ago when we forced the release of 2 immigration detainees from Priti Patel's Home Office van in Pollokshields, Glasgow. And I remember when I went into the back of a police van to negotiate with those officers, and there was over 1,000 people, and it was on the day of Eid, and it was young and old, black and white, gay and straight, Muslim, Hindu, Sikh, Jewish, a whole community there. And I stepped in the back of the van, and the police officer said, "Thank you for coming, Mr. Anwar." I said, "Well, you've got 2 alternatives." They said, "Well, what's alternative? What's option A?" I said, "Option A is you release those men into my custody. You give us a guarantee that they will not be arrested or be detained by the Home Office within the next 24 hours, so they are free to do what they wish. And we will march them to the local mosque, and then everyone will be told to disperse." And the police officer said, "Well, we're in discussions with the Home Office. We can't do that." And I said, "Look, the First Minister," I said, "the Hamza Yusuf, the Justice Minister, has been in touch. Priti Patel's not picking up the phone. Are you going to answer to her, or are you going to answer to the people on the streets?" They said, "Well, we can't do that." I said, "Well," they said, "What's option B?" I said, "Option B is you have 40 riot vans, you have up to 200 police officers, you have 200 police officers, let them loose. Use your batons, attack the crowd, but you will be picking up the pieces for 20 years to come." Of course, an hour later, the police came back and said, "We're going to release them." So we marched. I'm going to finish off by saying that spirit That spirit we saw in Glasgow erupted months ago in Nicholson Square in Edinburgh. It erupted in Peckham. And if black lives still matter in Scotland and in England and Wales and wherever, then we have to stand up for the family of Sheku Bayo. This public inquiry will last up to 2 years. The first chapter has just finished after 8 weeks, but the family sat with silent dignity. They sat with rage as the restraint officers gave evidence, but not one officer took the opportunity to turn to Sheku's mother and sisters to express their condolences, never mind remorse. No family should ever have to go through the burden of losing a loved one in police custody and then find that the legal system fails them and that they have to set up a campaign for justice. Today, we cannot afford to wait for those who are desperate and vulnerable to explode with fury. Asylum seekers, the poor, young people, prisoners, deaths in custody are not only demonized and exploited, but they're negated as human beings, an object of hatred at worst, or pity at best, invisible in their misery. Black lives matter not just in the United States. They matter here too. Families need support and they're not getting it. And Sheku's mother, I want to conclude with her words. Amanata, she says she wants people to think of her only son, not as another black man who died in following a struggle with the police, but to remember him as a bright young man who any parent would have been proud of. A wonderful son, a wonderful brother, an uncle, a loving partner to Colette, and a loving father to 2 young boys. Sadly, Sheku is not by any means the first black man to die in custody, but I hope that his name does not fade from memory and that one day the name of Sheku Bayo leaves us a legacy that his children can be proud of. So what I want to say to you is that there is something deeply shameful about our justice system where people who wear uniforms unlawfully kill people, and those people who do the killing are called our protectors, and the perpetrators remain free. The dead cannot cry out for justice. It is the duty of the living to do so for them. Thank you.
A massive thank you to Amma Anwar for such a powerful contribution to our opening rally. Before I bring in our final speaker, I just wanted to make a brief announcement that the Draper's Bar is going to be open after the rally ends. This is a bar that is on site at Queen Mary, and definitely that people should join us for a drink and come and listen to David Rovick's play at the Draper's Bar as well. But we want to continue the discussion and getting to know one another and so on. So don't rush off after this rally. Stick around because the bar on site will be open. To bring in our final speaker, I'm going to introduce Lewis Nielsen, who is a leading member of the Socialist Worker Party and one of the organisers for this event. So, Lewis.
Well, look, I want to thank every speaker who's spoken to us tonight, because every speaker on this stage, I think, is a fighter. When you hear the different struggles, the different fights, and the different campaigns that each one of these people has talked about tonight, you get a sense that we have a huge fight on our hands. There is a battle on for the kind of world that we want to live in. Because when I hear about the disputes that Bella and Jane and Hayden talk about, I don't think it's just about those individual strikes. They are fighting against the government. They're fighting against a system with politicians and big bosses stitching it up to make profits off the back of ordinary people. And they're doing it and they're fighting against the way that we are made to pay for their crisis. Because you see, they talk about a cost of living crisis, but we should remember the human impact of that, what that means for people's lives. 1 in 3 children in Britain grow up in poverty. Real wage cuts of 12%. Fire and rehire across the board. And they try and blame it by saying it's inflation. And what they try and blame inflation on is a so-called wage price spiral. What they try and say is that Bella and Jane and Hayden are greedy. They're greedy for asking for more wages. Let's be clear, the crisis on our economy is not caused by the people you've heard tonight. It's caused by the profits of the super rich. It's a profit price spiral. How do we know that? How do we know that? Well, let's look at the bosses. Let's look at the boss of Network Rail. Andrew Haynes, an OBE, earns £550,000 a year. The top 10 earners of Network Rail earn between them £3.68 million per year. And they're telling Bella she can't have a pay rise. They're advertising jobs as a station control assistant for £20,000 a year. The people who were on strike last week, the so-called big earners. So what we've heard tonight of the people striking back, that has blown that illusion out of the water. RMT members striking has done more to give a class feeling in British politics than any words from any Labour politician or a trade union bureaucrat, to be honest. And the thing we have to say as well is that Network Rail is not a special case. Actually, this is happening across the board. Across the board, bosses are trying to make us pay for their crises. First, it was austerity. Then it was the pandemic. And now it's inflation. And that's why the fights that we've heard tonight are so important. And if these groups of workers can win, then every group of workers can win. And that's important because surely one of the big things that has to come out of this festival this weekend is how do we get more of this? One thing that has to come out is, yes, the RMT need to name more dates, but we've got to make sure that the RMT strike isn't a one-off. We need more strikes like this against the cost of living crisis. And that's part of a wider fight back. Because Tandrima and Aamer talked about it. One of the main ways they're trying to get out of this crisis is to play the card of racism and division. Across the world, you see the forces of racism and the far right at their strongest level in decades. Look at Europe. Look in France, where Marine Le Pen, a fascist, an Islamophobe, an anti-Semite, gets 41% of the vote. Look at Spain, where 37 migrants are bludgeoned to death by border guards for crossing the sea. Look at Texas, 47 people dead in the back of a truck. This is what borders do. Borders kill, that's not a slogan, that's a reality. And it's not that far away from home. We know that Boris Johnson and Priti Patel, as people have said, are intensifying the forces of racism. And again, look behind the headlines. What does the hostile environment mean? Tandrima talked about it. It means refugees drowning in the Channel. It means people sitting on planes about to be deported to Rwanda. It means people's front doors being smashed down by immigration raids. And it means our Romani community facing the brunt of the police. I heard this week that the London Met has been put in special measures, the Met Police. My school was put in special measures when I went there as a kid. It's not a good sign. There is one special measure I think that would be good for the police. It's called abolition. We could get rid of the whole thing. We face a government that is hell-bent on whipping up racism and Islamophobia. And that's why it's so important we have more strikes. We need more demonstrations like the 18th of June. But we have to build an anti-racist movement as well. We have to strike, and at the same time, we have to say that every single migrant and refugee is welcome here. That every border has to be torn down. And so what this weekend is about, it's about recognizing that everything we've heard tonight, these aren't separate fights. All these fights are linked. Because we should remember that the same bosses who attack our pay and living standards, people who pour fuel on the fire while our planet burns, same people who are spending billions of pounds in a war in Ukraine that will destroy the lives of more people, create more refugees, and bring us to the edge of nuclear disaster. The reason we've held this event this weekend, the reason we hold Marxism Festival, is to say that all these things aren't an accident. They don't just fall from the sky. Racism, war, climate change, poverty, inequality, sexism, transphobia, all those things are linked. All those things are hardwired into our DNA. Because it's not into our DNA, into capitalism's DNA. Because what Virginia talked about is important. Because they use the question of racism, but they're coming for every single gain we've ever made. It's shocking that in America, millions of women now won't have access to abortion. What an indictment of the system, that a right that women fought for 50 years ago can now be taken away. And what an indictment of mainstream politics, that the so-called progressives and the Democrats didn't codify it into law when they could. But it doesn't just stop there. Again, if that feels far away, remember, the so-called culture secretary, Nadine Dorries, tabled a bill to limit abortion rights here in Britain. That's the same Nadine Dorries who comes after the Black Lives Matter movement. The same person who comes after trans rights. The same government which stops us speaking out on Palestine. One of the big messages we have to send this weekend is that all these fights are linked. Because when we think about these different crises, we are seeing a total crisis of the system. And we need a total response. I was surprised last week to hear James Connolly's name thrown up. I didn't expect to see James Connolly being raised on the Robert Peston show on ITV at 10 o'clock. But James Connolly once said that we only want the earth. Connolly said that because it meant we need to win our different struggles, but we've got a much bigger vision. We've got a much bigger vision of winning a different world. And therefore, to win that world, we have to think how we organise. We have to say that we're not going to settle. We're not going to settle for the least worst option. We're not going to settle just for 7% rise for the RMT. They should have an inflation pay rise, a pay rise in line with inflation. We're not just going to settle for the idea that the best thing that working class people can hope for as their representation is a prophetic figure like Keir Starmer, who can't decide which side he's on. We're not going to settle for the idea that working class people just have to look to what happens in Parliament. We have to have a much bigger vision about how change comes about. And to do that, we have to understand that real change in society can come from below. We have to understand that the protests of ordinary people in the streets is 100 times more effective than what happens in the corridors of Westminster. The protests at Kenmure Street, in Edinburgh, in Peckham have done more to stop immigration raids than years of lobbying from MPs. We need to see more than that. The Black Lives Matter protests have done more to raise the questions of Sheikh Ubayo, of George Floyd, than years of Democrat politicians. The climate strike movement has done more to put the question of climate change on the table than years of NGO lobbying and all the rest of it. And let me tell you, 40,000 rail workers going on strike has done more to hit back at the cost of living crisis than any hot air from a trade union bureaucrat. And that's why we need to see more of it. So like I said, what this weekend is about, and the reason we host this festival, is to think about how we can link these different struggles. And to do that, we have to raise our sights. We have to look at each movement. We have to learn from it. We have to build solidarity with it. But we have to think how it can feed into much bigger revolutionary change. Like I said, there is a huge battle on in society. There is a huge battle on about the kind of world that we want to live in. It matters that the RMT win. It matters that we get justice for Sheku Bayo. It matters that we stop the deportation flights to Rwanda. But it also matters that that feeds into a much bigger fight for a different kind of world. The title of this weekend is Marxism Festival. People in this room, I'm sure, will know the final line of the Communist Manifesto, that famous quote, "Workers of the world unite, you have nothing to lose but your chains." The bit that's often forgotten is the bit that says that comes after that, which is that we have a world to win. I think from the speakers tonight, we've heard examples and we've got a sense that our side is beginning to move. You get a sense of the different chains that are being broken down. But in every speech we've heard tonight, you've also got a glimpse about what a different world can look like. If we're going to fight for that different world, we need to get organised. If you're not a member, you should join the Socialist Workers' Party. Help us break those chains and let's build that better world together.
A big thanks to Lewis for closing our opening rally, and a massive, massive thank you again to all of our speakers for that fantastic rally. Just a reminder, we're going to be in the Drapers Bar. If people want to join the party, like Lewis said, they should talk to the people with the pink T-shirts, the Marxism team, or go by the SWP information desk that's in the corridor of the People's Palace. See everyone at Drapers.